Welcome to the Been There, Done That podcast, where we give our guests the opportunity to talk openly about the career, their ups and downs, and all things in between. You can follow the podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, and you can also watch it on YouTube. If you enjoyed the podcast, give us a like and a follow on our social media, which you can find in the link in the show notes. Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 21. This week, I'm back in the studio and joined with dietitian Liana Nici. Liana is a sports dietitian who works with the West Coast Eagles AFLW team and also works one-on-one with clients as well. Liana has a diverse experience working with WAFL level players as well as fighters preparing for their weight cuts for fights. We discuss several nutritional topics as well as general advice to help with improving performance from a nutritional standpoint. If you'd like to get in touch with Liana, all the details
preparing for their weight cuts for fights.
Thank you, and hope you all. We discussed several. If you'd like to get
rolling.
Thank you very much, Liana,
Preparing
for
for
joining
their
me on
weight
the podcast
cuts
today.
for fights.
Thanks for having me.
Nice. How are you feeling? You good?
Yeah, good.
We're ready to get
good.
stuck into
I'm ready for this chat.
hot topics,
Yeah.
all about the nutrition space in sport. Explain a little bit about yourself. How did you kind of get into the field and all that?
Yeah,
Take it
so
away.
I'm a sports dietitian normally.
Yep.
So I do have a private practice as well as I work with a few teams. How I kind of got into it was just wanted to get my foot into the door, I guess. It's a very protected space. The sports dietetic world is hard to get into. I started working at East Row WAFL Club.
Yep.
For about 3 years there, just kind of offering whatever I could do. Started off doing like skin folds, presentations, all that kind of thing. And then from there, I was working a little bit with the Women's Perth Glory team as well as Perth Demons, WAFL Club as well. And then from there, I started working with the Women's West Coast team, which has been an absolute amazing ride.
Yeah, right. Such a broad kind of like footy and then with men and women as well.
It is, yeah. And that's exciting because I get to see both sides of it as well in terms of it's so different between the men and women. And then in my private practice side of things, I see everyone from, long distance runners, swimmers, dancers, combat sports is another big passion of mine at the moment, or has been for a little while. So really love the variety and working with athletes as well as I do work with the general public as well, which is amazing. But the athlete mentality is something I'm pretty passionate about. So working in that space is pretty cool.
I bet. So what kind of got you down to the nutrition or dietetics pathway?
Yeah, well, I wish it was a easy answer, but it was more just a massive foodie. So my life revolves around food. I'm Italian too, so everything kind of revolves around that. And then I'm a bit of a science geek, so the human body is a bit of a passion of mine, and then combining the both. From there, I decided I wanted to go and do nutrition, so I went to Curtin and did my Bachelor of Science in Nutrition. After that, I wanted to delve into the side of things a little bit more in terms of the diet-disease relationship. So I went on and did my Masters at Curtin to become a dietitian. And then a couple of years in the field, I then wanted to become a sports dietitian. So I went over to the Australian Institute of Sport, did my accreditation of that, and then became a sports dietitian.
Wow, there you go.
Bit of a journey.
Yeah, right. So you almost started like a little bit of interest and then it's a good passion almost.
You're very lucky that what I wanted to do straight out of school is where I'm at the moment. So one of the lucky ones, but very passionate about what I do.
Does it get hard for you being a professional now, but seeing other people kind of pick up nutrition as like an interest, but then they kind of give out advice whereas really they shouldn't be because they're not trained in the field? And
yeah, I think it used to bother me a lot more in my early stages of my career. I'd just be a little bit riled up about the Insta bloggers and PTs giving out advice. And it was something that I was pretty passionate about and really wanted to advocate for dietitians, and I still do because essentially, without sounding too crazy, but we are the specialists in the field. It's what we are trained to do. So making sure that, people are getting the right kind of advice. But now it's kind of been solid in what I like to deliver to my patients, my clients, just to make sure that whatever they're getting is evidence-based and it's suited to them, and just advocating for that, because you're always going to get, especially with food, everybody eats food. So everybody has an opinion about food.
Yeah.
So you're already going to have that noise around, but it's just been pretty solid in making sure that people are coming to the right person for the advice, make sure they're getting the best help they can get.
Is it something to do with also the individual itself and how they tolerate different foods? Is there like a trial and error with the way you prescribe eating to people? Is how do you feel eating this type of food? Is that kind of the
absolutely
right?
Yeah. And I think that's why many people are very quick results based.
Yeah.
That's why fad diets are such a big thing, because they give you the quick results and that's what people want. When it comes to sustainable nutrition, which is where we should all be headed, for health reasons, long-term performance, all of that, the answers aren't black and white like we want it to be. There is that grey area. That is that trial and error. It's the finding out what's going to work for the individual a lot more, and that's where the best advice comes from. Is you have to get to know the individual, their lifestyle, their goals, their motivations, all that behavioural side of things is so important, and that influence what a person eats. And so in my sessions, I probably talk about food and the impact of food on health and performance probably in the first session. And then every other session just becomes behavioural. In terms of how are you putting it into your life? Does it fit? What's your thinking around? What's your relationship with food and your body? Which is another really big passion of mine. But that's all very important when it comes to working with a client or patient. Because
that's like the big thing is like stress eating as well, and how much stress impacts everything, not just like your body, but how you eat to make yourself feel better.
Yeah, absolutely. So stress eating, comfort eating, emotional eating, boredom eating. All of that has an impact. Even the food available, the skills you have to prepare the food, the money you have to buy the food. There's so many impacts, or how you see your body, what you want your body to look like. Again, your relationship with your food, your body, everything impacts what you put in your mouth. So we need to kind of work out that area first before we even approach, how do we make it consistent? How do we keep it going?
The long-term sustainability of you can't say diet, because diet is like the short term, but it's like a long-term way of eating takes like a long, people want that quick fix. How do you have that conversation with someone that if they come in with that mentality of I need something for like 8 weeks or a 6 week or something just to kind of get me to this point? Is there a way you kind of communicate it's a longer term approach than that? Yeah,
there's a lot of compromise going on, I'd say. Earlier on in my career, I think I was very much just wanting to help anyone and everyone. And that a lot of that time meant that I was compromising my beliefs around, not my beliefs, but what I know can work. In terms of, going strict calorie diets and all of that with people just to make sure they get what they were wanting. But then it's the understanding that that's only a short-term fix. People need that sustainable relationship with food and their body, and essentially that's what leads to long-term health. So it's just explaining that to the person. Again, understanding where they're coming from, their motivations, and how we kind of get that balance. When it comes to, for example, specific things like combat sports, when we enter fight camp, and I do strict kind of macro counting in order to get them, the weight category they need to. And that we're taking a bit of a different approach, but the concept's still the same, and the same principles are there about just providing the body with what it needs, and that means a balance of foods, we need. And I label it body food, and soul food is another one that we have. So we don't have good or bad food, but it's just communicating that with the client and getting them on board with that too.
The labels, like you said there, the soul food, and there's no such thing as good and bad. It's like the diet thing. Like it's all labeling and how you perceive what it is, isn't it? Yeah,
it's such a mental game. It really is. And that's what you're working with how a client, an athlete, patient, anyone is on board with changing their diet, their lifestyle, is you need to work with the behavioural side of things. So we need to, my approach is we cut down the labels. We don't have good or bad, healthy, unhealthy. I do break it down to things like body food, soul food, sports nutrition food. So that way we can find a place for all foods in our diet or in our lifestyle.
That's interesting. So it's not an elimination at all. It's accommodating.
It is. And obviously that comes down to what a person what they like and what they can tolerate. But the moment you stick a label on something, it becomes like the forbidden fruit. And we feel like we need to binge on it, and then we feel guilty about it. So then we restrict it. And then when we have it, we binge it, we feel guilty about it, and we get stuck in this horrible cycle. Whereas the moment you remove those labels, it really does open up everything. And you can go, okay, well, I can still reach my weight management goals, or I can still reach my goal of building some lean muscle mass while still living my life as well. It sounds like it's a dream world, but it actually
work. So how much does it differ from an athlete than like a everyday person who comes in for advice?
You think it would differ a lot, but it actually doesn't.
No.
So what I really try and promote with my AFLW players especially is this is a way of life. They're athletes. It's not a short term, like for example in the combat sports where it is short term in the lead up to fight. They're constantly training and need the fueling and the recovery that their body needs. Health is always the main priority, and then performance is after that.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really change too much because we need to make sure that at whatever life stage they are or whatever activity level they are, they're getting enough of what their body needs.
Yeah.
Just altering it. So we would focus a little bit more around timing around training and games and what game day eating would look like and what recovery eating would look like. But essentially the same principles are still there. It's just that altering just that little bit.
So let's use the West Coast Women's as an example. For a pre-game, is there guidelines that they should be hitting? Like, is it set out as guidelines, or is it this is what you should be eating, for example?
Yeah, well, we talk in more rather than, grams of carbohydrates or anything like that, which, if an athlete or a person does need that, then, I'll compromise and we'll do that. Because that's just working with the individual. But we talk in terms of foods and timing around foods. So we'll talk about specific types of carbohydrates to have pre-game and what that timing would look like. So with the individual, we would stagger it. So, if we're playing in the afternoon, let's make sure you get a good breakfast, get an early lunch. Maybe when you get to the grounds, we'll have something. And I usually prepare like a pre-game table of eating. We'll do halftime food, and then we'll also do like a recovery bar section where I'll set out different foods just so I can make sure the players, again, appropriately fueled and recovering the way they need to, knowing that we're going to back it up again with training afterwards as well as the game the next weekend. So
is it important that they kind of maintain a regular eating pattern? I'm trying not to say diet. Eating pattern during the week, and then it's the day of the game that they kind of change the way they eat?
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, because, they're training minimum 3 times a week. And you've got the recovery session. So their body's constantly fueling and recovering. So that sustainable eating comes in during the week, and then we tailor it around, training sessions, making sure that, they're eating well pre-training and their post-training meal usually provided by the club in pre-season to in-season. So I will monitor that and choose their meals for that. And then we talk about what the day before the game looks like. So a bit more of a carb load kind of thing. Just again, so their body their stores are stocked up the way they need to. And then, the pre-game's a little bit different. So it does alter with each of the players. They all have their own, what works for them. But I do also provide a selection of foods for them as well, which is quite good. It's interesting to eat different habits.
What are the funny ones? Like, do you have any funny stories of what players eat some funny things?
So I do have, I tend to set out pre-game. We'll have things like muesli bars, fruit, pikelets, lollies, but then some of the players only like specific colours. So I may spoil them a little bit by changing around the cups and make sure they only have that particular colour. But anything I can do to kind of, create a good environment for them, encourage them to have that pre-game feed as well.
That's funny, different colours. We've had one guy, we changed
colors of the Powerade, and usually he doesn't have a lot of Powerade.
He's so fussy on their Powerade.
But he changed from a blue and we got a red. So he's like, the red. And so he reckons he had a few more cups of red Powerade than he usually would. And he had the worst stomach. He had like cramps, had to go to the toilet a couple of times during the game. He said he repeated them bad.
Well,
crazy.
We trial things a lot during training. So the color of the Powerade too, I'll notice when the girls don't like it because it will hardly be gone.
Yeah.
So they have their favorites. Slushies we play around with too, especially because women we play. It's going to be even more. So this season, we've moved the season up in peak heat. Yeah. So slushies, that kind of thing. So definitely catering, and at West Coast we're very fortunate to have amazing resources that we can play around with these things. But just making sure that athletes getting exactly what they need.
You were saying before about the timing around when you eat before a game. Is it the same to do with hydration as well?
Yeah. So really push that hydration is just as important as the food you're eating too. So you get similar impacts to the body if you're dehydrated, just like you're under fueling. So in, a sport like football, that means your ability for quick decision making goes out the window, agility, all of those actions that we really need. So hydration is very important. The forms of hydration are really important too. So we tend to use 3 major forms of sports hydration. So water, always going to be the go-to, but also electrolytes like aqualyte, hydrolyte, essentially replacing the electrolytes that you're losing in sweat. So your body's more likely to hold on to that hydration. And then like we just mentioned, things like Powerade sports drinks are also really used just to keep the player fueled throughout the whole game.
The quick, simple sugars.
Absolutely. Simple sugars, So they're the types of carbohydrates that we aim for that during a game, just so your body can break it down a lot easy. So again, with hydration, the thing that people think about with cramping's a big issue, especially in these type of sports. People automatically think it's the hydration or salt factor, but it's actually the carbohydrate intake. We need the muscle to be actually fueled with carbohydrates. So things like sports drinks are really powerful for that, to make sure the body is fueled throughout to really avoid that cramping happening.
Interesting. So usually what I've noticed over the years is always at the start of the season, or when you have your few trial games, players cramp continuously, but then it dies off throughout the season. But you might come up depending on how hard or intense a game is. Do you have a reason why I usually see it at the start of the year? Is it that factor that they maybe haven't had as much sport drinks or previously or aren't in a rhythm of eating it?
Yeah, well, there is an element of deconditioning. It's just naturally, although if you try and get game simulation in training, it's never going to replicate the same intensity of a game. So you are going to get that factor in. But we'll always trace it back. Okay, well, how hydrated are you? Did you have enough carbohydrates? What was your carb loading like? Did you carb load after the game too and prep for the next game? So it's constantly fueling and refueling. So it's just a process of elimination around that. But typically, I do find, the first couple of games of the season, majority of players will probably cramp due to deconditioning or just not used to that intensity.
Yeah.
But then again, if you get strategies right, that should taper off towards the end of the season.
I found the hydration one of the biggest things for me personally, playing around with like having aqualyte. So sometimes I might do a double session. So I might go do Muay Thai and then I'll come home, and then because of time and stuff, I just go straight to the gym and do my weights and then work the rest of the day. One of the biggest things I found was when I'll just come after Muay Thai, have a aqualyte or whatever, drink it up and then go straight to the gym. I feel so much better. Is it kind of like an equation, like how there's like rehydrating after a game with fluids? Is it better to have like all that liquid, like you say, how many milliliters you have to rehydrate with aqualyte as well? Or is it sometimes you just wasting that aqualyte as well if you're having it with 2 liters of fluids?
Well, you are going to get like more bang for your buck if you have more of the electrolyte drinks to hold on to. Because essentially when you are rehydrating, you do want that salty element coming so that your body's actually holding on to. So you probably do want to rehydrate with things like sports drinks and electrolyte drinks. Rule of thumb is normally for every hour of exercise, there's an extra 750 mils of sports hydration on top of that. So again, whether it's water, electrolytes, or sports drink. That's just, again, general public or athletes. Athletes, we can kind of taper that a little bit more around, their percentage body loss, weight loss due to sweat pre and post game, and then we can alter hydration factors according to that. But yeah, using electrolyte drinks, or if you're having, for example, water as your drink, I would eat something salty, whether it's like Vegemite on toast or something like that. So my body is more likely to hold on to that hydration. Yeah, maybe not that one.
The boys like that with their pizzas after the game, and I always say, because you got the bread is always full of salt.
Yeah.
And you got all the processed meats and stuff. It's full of salt.
Yeah. Well, I have my opinions and stuff like that.
Oh, really? What's your thoughts?
Well, no, I'm definitely fine with, as I mentioned, soul food. So you're okay.
It's after a game though.
After a game. So I remember having this compromised chat with the WAFL boys too about I know it's a thing that you get pizza post game. I get that. But just make sure between that, let's get some proper recovery in. So whether it's like having choc milk or an up and go or some Powerade or a sandwich or something before you then delve into the pizza and beers, which normally happens after a WAFL game, stereotypically, of course, just so you get that appropriate recovery in. Something that's too high in fat, like a pizza, really takes too long for your body to break down. So you're probably missing that optimized position where your body can take up that carbs and protein, which we really need for recovery. Right. So trying to minimize too high fat foods after you train or play, so that way your body can really maximize that recovery, depending on whatever your turnover time is. Yeah.
Forget about the fats, because he's right, because it does take a while for your body to break the fat down, and then by the time it gets in your bloodstream, that time period's gone.
Yeah, look, there is no magic window that people talk about that's, 30 to 60 minutes, you're going to get it all in to get max gains. Doesn't really happen. Because, yes, your body will take up the most in that period. However, your body will still continue to absorb and take up what it needs to over a 24 to 48 hour period. So every meal actually contributes to that fueling and recovery. It just depends. For example, if you are training at night and you're trying to back it up again the next morning, your recovery meal is going to be really important, because you're essentially recovering and setting yourself up the next day. So it's a very individualized approach. That's why it's best to get individualized help for that.
Yeah, right. So we've gone back to the electrolytes before. What I was trying to get at is there an amount that's too much? Like, is there a point where I'm having so much aqualyte to try to rehydrate that it becomes useless? Like, if I'm taking too much and I'm already rehydrated and then I'm just urinating it all out?
I think, again, it's a little bit of a hard one, because something with electrolytes, provided, there's minimum sugar in it, it's purely just the electrolytes, then no, you can't really overdo it too much. I think you'll feel it definitely if you do. You'll be very bloated. Yeah. And you feel very uncomfortable if you've reached that limit. But when it comes to something like sports drinks, like Powerade, for example, yes, you can overdo it, because then you're eating an excessive amount of sugar intake coming through there, which is beneficial for a time and period. But sports drinks outside of training can essentially be seen as like soft drinks with the amount of sugar that they can have.
And you were talking about just before, you're saying that about eating to fuel up if you have another training early in the morning. How much does your pre-dinner meal, or having your dinner, is there an appropriate amount of time you want to have to allow for digestion before you sleep, to have a good night's sleep?
So this is something that comes up quite a bit. People say, or people believe that they need to stop eating carbs at a certain time or stop eating dinner at a certain time. Really, your body doesn't know what time of day it is. You essentially control it. We see it in shift workers. So you control the timing of your body. As long as you're not going to bed, an hour before you go to sleep with a really heavy stomach, but that's the main goal. Because you don't want to be sleeping with a heavy stomach, because then you're disrupting your sleep patterns, and then it's your sleep patterns that impact how your body then stores the food, hunger levels the next day, and your quality of sleep as well. So that's the main thing, just making sure you're not going to bed with a really heavy stomach. Now, that's something we play around with quite a bit, especially with athletes, because training tends to finish quite late at night for some athletes. I know I have some boxers that don't get home until 9:30 at night after training, and then it's how you're going to smash out a big meal before you then get to sleep. So we work on strategies around that. And sometimes, again, it's that staggering of the recovery. So having something to eat on the way home, whether it's like, again, up and go, piece of fruit, anything like that. For certain situations, it might be a protein shake. And then it just buys you some time to then not feel like you also need to have a really big meal for dinner. You possibly could reduce the portion sizes so then it's not so sitting so heavy on your stomach before you go to sleep. Again, it's just that very individualized approach about what can work for someone.
Yeah, so you want to pretty much essentially may have a lighter meal, but spread it, say on the way home you're having something that takes a while. Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's the best way to do it, especially too because your body will only take up a certain amount of protein at a time. So it's not a lot. So you're better off spreading it out throughout the day. So you're giving your body more of an opportunity to take that up, especially if your goal is around increasing lean muscle mass, or, if you're doing a high amount of cardio and you need to maintain your lean muscle mass, making sure you get enough protein throughout the day. And more uptake is the goal around that.
Have you had much anything to do with intermittent fasting and that kind of approach? Because that kind of goes against what you were just saying, spreading the protein out.
Look, any of the sort of diets like intermittent fasting, 5 and 2, keto, I never fully discredit them because they actually can work for people. The main goal you want, though, is it needs to be sustainable. So whatever you do, if you can honestly say you could follow that way of eating for the rest of your life, go for it.
Yeah.
If you know it's only going to be a short term and it's going to drive you insane, or you really just can't follow it because it's actually lacking in something you're after, which we tend to see with things like keto and paleo diets, then it's not the one that you should be following, especially if you want to go down that sustainable route. Now, intermittent fasting, we're getting more and more research around it. Don't fully know the long-term effects of it just yet, but short-term, people are getting some really great results. My biggest thing, though, with that is, does it fit into your lifestyle?
Yeah.
So, for example, some people naturally just don't feel hungry first thing in the morning. So it's pretty easy for them to wait it out to that window period if they're doing that 16-8 style. But other people wake up really hungry, and I'd much rather someone feed themselves when they're hungry as opposed to feeling like they really need to push it out just because they're trying to meet that fasting period. We don't really want to lose touch with our hunger signals because it's our key to making sure that we're giving our body what it needs in the right amounts and your own portion sizes, because you're essentially learning to eat when you're hungry and stop when you're full. So it's just catering to your body and working with your body.
Yeah. I guess as well with those hunger signals, if you keep holding out for it, it makes you more susceptible to eating the sugary foods as well, because the cravings get worse and worse.
Yeah. And by the time you sit down to eat, you probably don't realize how hungry you are, and the portion size become
your eyes get too big. Yeah.
Absolutely. Or you might then hit that meal and be over hungry that you're less likely to eat, and then it pushes everything back again. So just be really mindful before you do start those sort of diets about how does it actually fit into your lifestyle? Does it fit naturally, or do you need to make some adjustments? Is it still acceptable to just eat normally with your main meals and your snacks? Like that could still get you where you're after.
So typically, how much protein does one absorb in one meal? Like, is it
it's around about the 25 to 30 gram mark. Now, there's more research coming through about if we can push that higher, but that's usually the amount. So like I said, it's probably on a plate, if you're thinking about it, it's probably about a palm size of lean protein. So that's why, again, it's probably better to spread it out throughout the day so you can give more of a chance to take that up as well.
So what happens for those who don't know, it's the biggest, so whatever size of steak you have, and it's however many grams of protein it is, what happens to the other 15 grams of protein that doesn't get absorbed? Is it just sit in the bloodstream?
Pretty much. Yeah, okay. So this is my argument with supplements. So I'm very much food first approach. Yep. We can get all that we need from food in, but that again depends on the diet. They really struggle to get enough protein in, we can reach for protein supplements. So what you might find with a lot of protein supplements is they contain a lot more protein than your body tends to be able to take up. So essentially then you're paying for expensive urine and your body filters that out. Now the long-term impacts on your body, particularly your kidney, which is responsible for filtering that protein, too high levels of protein in your body for too long, or too high levels consumed for too long, can cause kidney damage. So we want to avoid making sure we're not having excessive amounts of protein for long periods of time, because it can start impacting how your body filters that protein, particularly through the kidneys, and then that potentially leads to damage there as well.
So I think you said it just then. Is there a time period of how long that kind of takes? Is it years and years of eating like that way, or is there
that one? You
no,
tested
really?
me there.
Yeah.
But it would probably, I'd say it'd be more in the years mark.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've definitely had clients have come to me saying impaired kidney function, and then we trace it back and we kind of go, well, how long have you been having excessive amounts of protein shakes or really big portions of protein, or mainly only eating protein? Have we got some good carbs and lots of fruits and veg in there as well?
Do you see many bodybuilders? Have they come to you for advice?
I haven't actually had many bodybuilders. No, that is a very specific area.
Because they probably have their own.
They would.
Bodybuilder pro dietitians to come or their air quotes, air quotes.
More specialized areas, I'd say. But yeah, but that's the thing too. Even bodybuilding competitions, like I've had like bikini model competitions, fitness competitions, that kind of thing. Same sort of thing with the weight category sports that I work with. Is it's a short term thing, so they can afford to work in a more strict environment for that period. However, it's not something I'd recommend long-term.
As well, but with that whole kind of environment, that whole bodybuilding field, it's all about how much protein can you eat, how much carbs, but then like the most important one, like fats, which is for all their hormones. Like that's how your body produces hormones, is through lipids.
Yeah, so there is a lot of misinformation out there, and I think that's again, I can't comment too much in the bodybuilding essence. I haven't really worked in that area. Probably for a reason. It's not really my field. But if we look, for example, in combat sports, so weight category sports. Now, the reason I became really passionate about working in that area was because it actually just broke my heart seeing the impacts and the negative impacts that can happen from when people really deprive themselves of the fueling thereafter in such a high training situation. So we've seen so many reports come through about deaths, people collapsing. So that's really what made me want to get into the combat sports. So I'm working with a few Muay Thai fighters at the moment, which has been incredible. So one of them I'm actually really proud of. She just became a world champ in the lightweight Muay Thai, which is amazing. But working with her, she even realized herself that after years of fighting, she was becoming, or essentially depriving herself of the most important nutrient you need for fueling, which was carbohydrates. And she was very shocked about the fact that I kept carbohydrates the whole time, despite needing her to cut a lot of weight. So it's a lot of misinformation out there, and it's just, again, advocating for what I know is where the evidence is, what I know can work, and again, working with the athlete about finding that common ground and that balance. But,
shout out to Vic as well. She was on, on the podcast. She shouted you out as well when she came. She talked. Yes, that's why I got you on.
Amazing. No, she's an incredible woman.
Yes, fantastic. One of a good inspiration to look up to, because I'm train Muay Thai as well.
Oh, fantastic.
It's always good to see her poster up in the gym, and it's like, one day.
Yeah, she's one hell of a powerhouse, that one.
I'm glad you brought up the combat sports. How difficult is it when someone comes in and they need to cut down in a time frame? Do you kind of run the math back and say, well, this is cutting it close, or going to go, this is kind of doable? Or
yeah, so that's the hard conversation. Is very grateful that the fighters I have had come to me with a good amount of time. So we have had some space to work with. But yeah, I have been in situations. I've had some rowers as well that have come to me with unrealistic timeframes. But that also happens with the general public too, thinking that they want to lose weight in a certain period of time. It's just having that conversation with them, getting them to understand, potentially the negative impacts, not only physically but mentally, what that can have to someone, about unrealistic timeframes and goals. I see it a lot, even when a client comes to me because their GP has told them that they need to lose weight because they're not in the healthy weight range and to get down to an unrealistic BMI. And again, it's a lot of holding it in because it's an area that I'm very passionate about. But it's having that difficult conversation and going, okay, look, but what's actually comfortable for you?
Yeah.
How can we make it work? But really knowing that your health is the most important thing. Supporting them if they need to have that conversation again with their coach, going, look, I know you want me to get down to this weight class, but I've sought out professional help and I just don't think we can do that. Is there a way working around it? But it's a very, very hard, touchy area. I completely understand that, especially knowing or understanding the athlete mentality and their goals and their motivation. But it's just finding that compromise about what can work.
So what stage, so however long the camp is, 8 weeks, for example, what do you kind of start pulling away at, like in terms of their nutrition? Is it pulling away carbs? Obviously, you said don't pull away carbs as much. Is it so the fats that you pull away and the protein?
It's a bit of a balance.
Yep.
And it does depend on the individual.
Yep.
So I will always give the same education to them as I would any other person, any other athlete around why we need certain food groups.
Yep.
Because what can happen when people start calorie counting, macro counting, they see everything as numbers and they'll eat anything and everything just to meet that. Whereas we really need to understand about the types of carbohydrates that are making up that macro, is the timing around it. So we work with that a lot at the beginning stages, and then we really hone in on the macros. So tend to keep carbohydrates quite high.
Yep.
Especially because in a 6-week fight camp, it's very intense. And it doesn't taper down until probably the last week, if not the few days before. So they need to be kept quite high. And then I'll manipulate protein. Initially, I'll keep it quite high. So that way, even if they're trying to drop weight, they're still maintaining that strength and that lean muscle mass, which is very important. But then that will be the one that I start to taper down. I'll keep fats as low as good range. I'd say as high as I can without it being too excessive. But yes, that'll be the one that I start to taper down again. And then when you hit around, depending on the rate that they're losing weight, 2 weeks out from the fight, then I'll start to bring carbs gradually down, just so we can start to get more of that water loss, I would say. Because they still really need to make sure their muscles are getting the carbohydrates that they need to keep training and recovering the way they need as well.
And of course, carbohydrates are protein sparing as well. So you can, as you pull away a little bit of protein, the more carbs you can keep almost saves you. Is that kind of the right way?
Essentially, yeah. Because the goal when you're in a 6-week fight camp is not to increase lean muscle mass. I should have done that a long time ago. But the goal is to get through a fight camp. And that becomes the fueling, the energy to get through it. It's enough protein to maintain the lean muscle mass. But yeah, the goal is, cool, let's maybe focus on more of the carbohydrates to keep going and to keep you through mentally as well, because something like an intense situation like fight camp can really send you through an emotional roller coaster and really challenges you mentally.
Oh, yeah.
If you're not providing your body with enough fuel to do that, your decision making, your thought process can all be impacted as well.
Yeah, that's for sure. When it comes to the last week or so, when it's time to make the weight and they however many kilos of weight, do you kind of guideline their weight cut at all, or the water cut?
Yeah, absolutely. So we really, my main thing is not to deprive the athlete prior to the fight. So still, like I said, we'll have carbs, which is something that I know most fighters aren't used to.
Yeah.
But I still keep carbs right to the end. I just drop them down to a minimum.
Yep.
Still keep protein, still keep fat, but we do things like a salt cut from probably about 5 days out.
Really?
And what that does is just to make sure that your body's just losing any excess water.
Wow.
About 3 days out, we start doing a fiber cut. Again, that kind of just makes sure that the body is losing as much excess fluid as it needs to. And that just helps us to avoid what a lot of people tend to do is spend hours and hours and days in saunas to try to use more of that passive hydration. So we try to do that active a little bit, but I also try to make sure that they remain hydrated the whole time too. So it probably won't be until about a day before, 2 days before weigh-in that we will then maybe go on a bit of a fluid restriction, but still, still around a litre or so, just to make sure they're still hydrated. But it's about keeping your body fueled, but possibly not too far dehydrating, but just removing some excess fluid.
So you don't actually recommend them to get into saunas or hot baths at all?
Can if they need to.
Okay.
Like I know I've had some fighters that just needed to drop that extra kilo. But the more that I can help them to drop as much weight as they can without having to rely on something like a sauna is the best approach, because one, it's going to help them feel better mentally about it too, knowing I only need to drop a kilo and that's okay, as opposed to I've somehow, which I've heard horror stories about people need to drop like 4 or 5 kilos the day before a weigh-in, and the drastic things they do that, and then they get to fighting and they have nothing in them to do it.
Right. That's the whole point. Which sometimes to me was what's the point of doing it if you're gonna, because you restrict yourself and you do all that, the sauna, and you go through that grueling process to have your performance on fight night be hindered because you've had to go through such a strenuous 3 or 4 days of cutting.
Absolutely. And it just, like I said, the reason I got into it, because it was breaking my heart to people that this is their passion. And, they've given it their all for, 6 weeks intensely, but longer term, obviously before that. And then to not be able to be their best on the day that it counts, it would just think ruin an athlete.
And it's also as well the toll it takes on your body, just not that fight day, but as well longer term, because every cut you do, that's bad. You get it's worse every other time up. It gets worser, if that's a word, every time after that, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's not just physically too, it's mentally. So again, my focus with everyone is always that overall mental health and wellbeing focus, because I have seen, again, fighters or anyone in combat sports or weight category sports, or just any athlete, is the impact it takes or has on their relationship with their food and body, and training them to come out of that intense period is pretty vital stage in order to then prep them for the next fight. Like I have fighters who have experience of just, they can't look at another number, or they can't look at food the same without counting it in their head constantly, or they don't know how to feel without tracking food, but then they also feel overwhelmed by tracking all the time, and not wanting to have another fight because it means they have to go through that traumatic process again. You wouldn't want it to be as traumatic as it is. So it's just coaching them through that as well.
Yeah, I guess that kind of borders your kind of job into like a psych job,
it does.
You have to talk them through their mental process and how they think around food.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I said always have that behavioral approach, and it is something that I absolutely love. And I guess that kind of helps me with a natural transition into what I do full time at West Coast with the women's team as well, being their player development manager. Helping them develop as people, I guess,
that's
off
cool.
field, which should really help their on field performance. I know it kind of came out of nowhere, that one. But if you think about it, it is what I do essentially with my clients too. It's just we really work on that holistic approach. Now, it is a different approach to a lot of dietitians that I know that people might have experienced in the past. Like I'm not that strict diet Nazi kind of food police person. But that's just because I really have a strong passion for making people or helping people to really work on their behavioral aspects around food, body, their mentality around all their actual motivations, like sustainable motivations, their goals, because that impacts yourself more than the food you eat.
Yeah.
Because it controls everything.
Being so also nutrition plays a big part in growing up as well, but there also plays into a lot of what that person does as well. So like, for example, we've had a few young boys kind of who've been kind of educated well about nutrition and having like protein shakes, for example, and like having chia seeds and doing all this sort of stuff in it to try to, bulk up or do whatever. But as soon as they started getting into a well-structured strength program, that has put on an unbelievable amount of size. How important or how much of a factor does the body mature and nutrition kind of play together?
Big time.
Yeah.
So I work with a lot of younger athletes as well, particularly because they are in a lot of stress in terms of school commitments and multiple sport commitments and growth elements as well. So vital to get some healthy eating patterns in order to support the level of exercise they're doing. Otherwise, one, it's going to start impacting their growth and development, energy levels, not going to be able to train or get the adaptations that we're after. It's very vital to get onto it. However, at any stage of life, it's still possible to change your eating habits and adjust the way that suits you at that particular stage. But it is so important whether you feel like you need that extra support or not, just to kind of get that. Sometimes it's just that confidence going, yeah, cool, I'm on the right track. And extra tips and tricks along the way as well.
We were talking about supplements before. I 100% agree with you that like protein powders and BCA, like amino acid, that sort of stuff now is essentially just a waste of money. But like in terms of supplementing like vitamins and all that sort of stuff, does that have a place in nutrition at all? Again,
it very much depends on the individual. So iron supplements is something that I always check with people if they need to take it. It obviously is up to the GP about prescribing an iron supplement. But particularly because I work a lot with female athletes, it is something that we talk about a lot. Then things like multivitamins and all that, again, if you feel like your diet might be lacking in it, that's when they can have extra benefit. However, if your diet is pretty good, you don't really need sometimes the extra push of the supplements. Anything you can't get in diet, sometimes omega-3s can work really well for that, because sometimes we just really can't eat enough in our diet. If you're constantly active and using your muscles intensely, magnesium can be a great supplement for that as well. But it is very much individual based. Obviously, there are other supplements. If you, for example, follow a vegan diet, you'll need to look into vitamin B12. However, before taking any supplements, I always recommend speaking to your GP, getting some blood tests done, because you can risk toxicity issues if you start taking supplements and you already have pretty well-stocked levels in your body. So you just make sure you get that.
Do you see that commonly? Do you see people come in and think, I think I'm lacking this, and then they go get tested and they're like, I actually got a lot of it?
Yeah. So we call that the worried well, essentially. So I actually, in my master's, I did my dissertation on it, because typically what you find is the people who take the supplements are the ones that probably don't need to take them. Because they're probably very aware of their diet. So want to make sure they already eat quite healthily or nutritionally complete. So they have the extra addition of the supplement. So it's okay with things like multivitamins and all of that, because again, it's just your kidneys are going to be great at filtering that out. But when it comes to something like an iron supplement, if you already have quite high levels of iron in your body, that can lead to some serious consequences. So again, always push to speak to your GP, get some blood tests done.
What are your thoughts around athletes going on the vegan diet? Is there a kind of a part of you that goes, this is dangerous? Or?
I love this question when Game Changers came out. Again, I'm not opposed to any way of eating that a person wants to follow. So whether it is, vegan, vegetarianism, paleo, keto, anything like that. Obviously, with something like keto or paleo, it's going to impact an athlete, I think, quite a bit. Because
it's a restriction of the carbohydrates.
Correct. But, veganism can still work. It's just if you follow a particular way, like veganism, vegetarianism, you need to be able to find that protein alternative.
Yeah.
What I tend to see is, even in my general public patients, it's more if they're following a vegetarian diet, they're great with vegetables, they're great with carbs, but then the protein tends to lack. I'm okay with you following, that meat alternative route, but let's make sure that we actually get that meat alternative protein. It's the same thing with the athletes too, is let's make sure you're getting enough protein to help with your recovery. Let's still make sure you get enough carbohydrates to help with your fueling.
Because the biggest the concern would be that if you're not getting enough protein, you're going to lose a considerable amount of weight. And if it's a sport that requires you to have strength and power and be explosive, and you're losing that where that source comes from, like your muscles then just kind of into your performance. And you might look leaner and you might be lighter, but the impact of what
And that's ultimately what it comes down to. It's why everything has to have that individual approach is what are you doing? What are your lifestyle practices? What are your intolerances? How can we make it work for you without making sure we're not compromising anything? Like you said, just because you might look leaner, how are you actually performing? And if that's your goal to perform at your best, well, we need to make some changes then.
Is there a kind of I know there's no such thing as a magic food, but what's your biggest bang for buck, like higher quality, quantity? What's your go-to recommended meal? Let's say meal, make it a bit easier.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. So you probably want me to have a fancy superfood or anything like that, but I'm a pretty realistic dietitian.
Yeah.
Like I like to break things down back to basics purely because it means it's more sustainable for people. You don't need to have fancy superfoods or the expensive foods to get to where you need to be in terms of health or your goal. So sometimes it blows people's mind that I say, sometimes the easiest simple meal could be a sandwich, because you think about it, you've got some couple of slices of good high quality carbohydrates, get some lean protein in it, bulk it up with some salad, and then you've got that nice balanced meal that your body's after. If it's a quick, easy one, it could be, a microwave rice cup and some frozen veg and a tin of tuna, and then you've got a nice quick meal there. As long as you're getting that combination with each meal, that lean protein, that high fiber carbohydrate, that fruit or veg element, you're basically ticking the boxes of all that your body is after for fueling, recovery, as well as your general day-to-day living. Just making sure your body's getting enough. So nothing too crazy. Sorry. Again, you probably wanted a nice, quick black and white answer.
I know there's no such thing as black and white. Everything is great. Have you ever played around or tried yourself any organ meats?
I personally haven't.
No.
Really?
Have
you?
I've played around a bit
Any
of liver.
favourites? Liver?
Beef liver.
Yeah.
Like grass-fed, all that sort of stuff. I tend to get most of my meat all grass-fed.
Yeah.
Just because I think it's important to kind of animal cruelty and that sort of stuff. At least I know if the cow's been out in the field for a little bit, pasteurised a bit, is a bit better for me mentally. I guess it's not under so much stress. So if it's not eating grain and being confined in a small area, then it's actually some good meat on it as well. But also the organs as well have been known to have the most amount of available vitamins, like iron as well. And in liver is very high, and that's why it has that bit of a funky taste.
Absolutely.
But in the old tribal times, that the organ meats would all go to the leaders of the tribe, because there was
max nutrients.
But it was, they didn't know that was the reason. That was just known as a delicacy.
Yeah.
But I've played around with beef heart as well.
Yeah, well,
kidney.
If you think about it,
and I get the protein and I know that there's vitamins and stuff like that in there as well, but it's going to help me.
Well, everything that we process and digest our foods, they're stored in different areas. So liver is like our powerhouse. So that's why it will contain our max nutrients and iron and vitamin A and all of our vitamins essentially. So yeah, they will contain the most. No issues with organ meats. I think they can be quite good. Sometimes they can be quite high in fat. So again, if you've got cholesterol issues, I'd probably be mindful about having those sort of organ meats, as well as vitamin toxicity. So if the vitamin levels are quite high and then you're eating some organ meat, so someone who has quite high levels of iron, I probably wouldn't recommend eating the organ meats, because again, if you think about it's where we store it. But all those issues aside, no reason why. Like, why not?
I think the heart has a little bit of fat in it as well. Kidney, I can't remember. Kidney had a little bit of fat in it. I recommend if you're ever going to try kidney, have it and try to. You're going to have to hide it or do something that's going to take away the foul taste.
Oh, how do you prepare it? What's the best way to?
I just pan fried it.
Pan fried.
But
okay.
But because it's weird, kind of, because it's like a kidney, right? It's got the little knobs, I guess, nobules or on it. Like it's a bit weird. Like the texture's weird. So you got to cut it up into like little cubes, and I just pan fried it. But the whole thing is you can't overcook it, because then it's just chewy crap. So a little bit has to be kind of raw in the middle. Yeah. But man, the taste is disgusting.
Worth it?
Not worth it. Not worth it. I had to soak it. So I had to Google how to get the taste out, and people said to soak it in milk because of the pH levels, the difference that takes away from it.
Tenderize it a little bit.
It tastes a lot better after you've had it in milk. But the funny thing was when I put it in milk, I put it in a little, like a shallow dish. A little bit of the top wasn't covered in the milk, and it still tasted bad. I was like, when I put it in there, I was like, oh, surely osmosis, it would like absorb the milk, right? Nah. Still, But then I was like, if I'm going to have kidney, I'm going to have to buy all this milk, and I'm not even drinking the milk.
Yeah, look, I might leave that one with you.
Yeah. But the liver, I love liver. I reckon it's great.
Okay.
I'd have a little bit, like it's 80 grams. Like you said, don't eat a lot of it because you get that toxicity levels, but just a little bit continuously, maybe like Monday to Friday, and then Sundays and whatever. But yeah, beef heart I love, like slow cook it. Because it's because what kidney and liver aren't is muscle tissue. So it's a bit of a different texture. But with beef heart, it's a muscle tissue, right? So it tastes like any other piece of meat you have.
Yeah.
But just because it's coming from the heart, it's mentally it's a bit weird.
It's all just a mental game, everything.
So I just put it in a slow cooker with a bit of bone broth.
Okay.
And some like salt and pepper.
Yeah.
And let it cook for 6-8 hours, and then I pull it out and chop it up. And then I just reheat it up if I have like breakfast and stuff.
Yeah.
Next to some eggs.
Yeah.
It's nice. Love it. That's full of vitamin A and coenzyme Q10 as well.
Yeah,
Q10.
yeah. It's the good stuff.
Going back to weekends. Do you get a lot of athletes or a lot of people who say, "Oh, weekends cheat meal" or anything like that? How do you kind of approach?
So I really don't like the word cheat day, cheat meals.
Of course, yes.
But again, that comes back to the relationship with food and why I use things like soul food, body food. Because if you are consistently allowing yourself to have these foods, what you find is your tendency to want to binge on it or restrict until you are allowed to have it drops down. Your consumption of them will probably drop down too, because you're essentially allowing yourself to have it anytime. So you're not waiting for the weekend, or you're not waiting for your cheat day and riding off the whole day. And then having that mentality of the all or nothing effect where you kind of go, oh, well, I'll pack it all in now because I've had my cheat day and I'll start fresh on Monday, or what we call the forbidden fruit effect, where if something becomes forbidden, so then all you want to do is just eat it and eat all of it. The moment you start allowing it in constantly, you find it actually drops off, and your body if you listen to your body will reach a point where it kind of goes, you know what, I've had enough soul food for now. I'm actually craving some vegetables. Give me some body food coming in. So when it comes to weekend eating for athletes, I do get them to try and be consistent with what they're doing during the week. Again, that allows for that soul food as well. But just be mindful, they tend to play or train on the weekends. So you need to still make sure that you're fueling yourself with the body food, still got that pre and post recovery in. If you are going to go out for dinner, so be it. That's absolutely okay. But just really making sure you're eating around trainings are still fairly consistent.
How does alcohol consumption fit in around that?
I'm okay with it. Yeah. It's okay.
Is there like, you're going to have a few people who if they go out on go Saturday night, they get out, go out with the friends, is there? And then Sunday becomes a write-off because, it's they crave the high fats. And
so that's the messaging around it is I'm okay with the alcohol coming in, but just be mindful about how you're doing it. So hydration is key. So always making a glass of water the first drink that you have. Do not try and quench your thirst with an alcoholic drink because it's not going to work. Have hydration between it as well. So a glass of water between your alcoholic drinks. And then that'll hopefully impact possibly how much you have to drink, or definitely the effects of it. So dehydration plays a big part in why you feel so hungover the next day. And then it's, the food that we tend to have when we're hangover eating. So the high fat foods tend to be the cravings. So just be mindful that, full day of that post drinking. And then if you're trying to then, Monday morning get back into training, you're probably going to feel a little bit sluggish.
Yeah.
So again, it just comes back to listening to your body. Is your body probably wants some body food during that time. Have that greasy meal. Again, that's fine. But if it's a full day of it, or possibly you've only had that one meal that whole day, just be mindful that by Monday morning training, when you're feeling highly motivated, but not giving yourself enough fueling, you're probably not going to get the results you're after in terms of you're not going to get through that training session.
Yeah. Is there a recommendation from yourself? When would the best time to have soul food, when would that be?
It's completely up to the individual. I know, I'm sorry. It's like grey answer. But if you think about why we have that soul food, it is going out with your mates, spending time with your partner. It's, it might be that comfort eating or that stress eating that you're feeling. Your body's like, hey, I just need some comfort right now. Please just give me, some ice cream just to soothe my soul a little bit. It's completely individual.
Okay.
I think the moment you start to put a time limit or going, Friday night's my soul food night, you might then have restrictive behaviors throughout the week because, again, you're saving it for that cheat meal.
I've got a feeling this might be the same answer. But if is there like a kind of a ratio of 80% like body food during the week or like a 20% soul food? Do you kind of go around that?
It depends on your goals.
Yeah.
So if you are an athlete who needs to manage their weight, then we'll probably go around that more of a principle coming through. If you're the general public, then it's completely open to what you would like to have. But so it's a conversation that I have a lot with my players as well, going, well, hang on, Liana, why aren't you putting us on a strict diet? Because we're athletes. But there is no ideal athlete body type diet. Right. It is what works for them mentally and physically, because you can still very much reach your goals by having that sustainable approach too. It's just being very strategic about it. But that's, again, very individual based.
Do you ever change your strategy from a pre-season phase of training to in-season? Does it ever change much at all?
In terms of the types of foods?
Yes, types of foods, or if they have to eat less in-season because they might not be training as intense. Because in pre-season, all trainings are intense. And because it's hard and all that sort of stuff as well. But then in-season, you might only have like your 2 trainings. You might have like a 1 medium, like 75% intensity training, like as a scale. And then your Thursday captain's run or something like that might be a lower intensity, 50%. But then you've got your most intense, which is a game day. So over the week, you might only really be burning less calories than you would be in a pre-season type phase.
Yeah, so the principles are still the same.
Yeah.
Still need carbs, whether you're training or not. Still need protein, still need fruit or veg. But you might unintentionally tailor it too. So, for example, or intentionally tailor it, but it might be, you had a captain's run, so you don't feel like you need to have that big, heavy feeling rice or pasta after you train. You might be okay with just having sweet potato or beans as your carb source. Tailor your eating with the snacks that you might be having. So if you're not training that day, you're not going to need that pre-training snack. So you essentially dropped that snack back. And that tailors to, making sure you got your input, output varies with that too. But essentially still keep pre-season, in-season fairly similar, just those minor adjustments like I said. And then in-season, we then cater for, obviously we'll have like a carb load day, 2 of those, pre-game day and post-game day, and then game day eating looks very different. So that's what will be the most different between in-season and pre-season. Off-season is different again because training changes, but you still want to make sure you've got some structure with that too. Off-season is probably the harder component to keep on track there.
Yeah, because then it's actually left up to your own device, because you can train whenever you want. You can
absolutely.
There's you're not seeing you, so you don't really have someone's there to be like, hey.
Exactly right. And that's why I'm very big on the education side of things and finding what works for the individual, why I pull back on providing strict meal plans and calorie counting, because when I'm not there, what are you going to do?
Exactly.
You need to be able to build the skills for yourself, because again, our lives and our stresses and everything change very so much. So you need to be able to adapt to that too, and that's what makes it sustainable, because strict meal plans don't allow for the changes of life, and you need to know how to adapt to that.
Okay. So what's your number one education tool, or your go-to education piece of advice you would give out to someone? Do you say, if the only thing you're going to take away from this podcast is this?
I think, you really put me on the spot with this one.
There's a few more coming, but get used to it.
All right.
Get ready.
My golden nugget, I think you really need to take an individual approach.
Yeah.
really make sure you're listening to your body. Your body is going to send you all the signals that you need in terms of hunger, low energy. Learn to respond to it with appropriate fuels. Don't cut out food sources unless you medically need to.
Yeah.
But really focus on your health as the main priority, and then your fueling and recovery to enhance your performance as well.
Yeah, right. When you say don't cut out certain foods, how much how much of an impact does on the general public, so not so much athletes, does high processed sugars affect the body, like the brain?
Well, we don't know, that they can lead to increased weight gain, and with weight gain, so for example, visceral fats, the fat around your organs, can leak toxins into the organs and impact their function. We hear about that. We see the gravel gut ads on TV. Yeah. We all see all that. But just your everyday impacts, the low energy, impacting your sleep quality, which will then impact how your body stores the food, as well as your eating behavior the next day. So you might be really hungry and you'll be craving sugars and you're craving more. So you're just entering this really negative cycle, which can really mess with you mentally as well, because you're depriving your body of the nutrients that it needs to run on, which can impact the hormonal function, and even neurotransmitters like releasing serotonin, a happy hormone, can be impacted purely just because you're not getting more of that body food in. So really putting emphasis on, let's just really nourish the body. Let's work with our body as opposed to against it because we want to get somewhere physically. Yeah.
And I guess as well, if you're maintaining, like, you won't end up eating a lot of those high sugary foods if you're maintaining a healthy balance of foods through the week and you're not kind of putting restrictions on certain things.
Correct. Well. Yeah. So I always put emphasis on really fill up your body on the body food. So think about the quality of what you're eating. So really satisfying your body. So in that plate setup, so for example, with a plate setup, we want half a plate to be fruit or veg, about a quarter plate to be carbohydrates, quarter plate to be protein. When you look at the quality of what you're eating, so providing those elements, you're naturally satisfying your body with what it's after. So, So for example, protein, your body will want to eat until you hit that protein limit. If you don't, you're constantly going to be feeling hungry. So let's satisfy the hunger by giving your body some protein. Carbohydrates, that's your body's most efficient fuel source. That's like adding petrol to the tank. You really need to make sure you get enough carbohydrates throughout the day to satisfy your energy levels. Half a plate of veg or fruit, that's the vitamins and minerals and fiber that your body needs. If you look at that quality, if you're more likely to get half a plate veg, you're more likely to stick to those portion sizes, the carbohydrates and the protein, because the fiber is going to help you out there. If you're not getting enough protein, you're probably going to want to overeat more on the carbohydrate side of things to fill that hunger void, which the protein would normally satisfy. If you're not getting enough carbohydrates, your body probably won't be satisfied for too long with just that protein, the vegetables. Yeah. Then you're also probably going to get some sugar cravings later, kind of that, 3:30-itis period or after dinner period, because your body was like, hang on a sec, I asked you to give me some energy. You didn't give it to me. So here's some sugar cravings just to make sure I get that energy that my body's after. So when you come back to the quality of what you're eating, you're probably going to lose some of those cravings a little bit more. Then when you come to the snacks, again, we want to think quality. If we think about why we're snacking, it's usually because we're hungry and we're low in energy. Come back to the food groups that are providing us with that. So protein and some good carbs or high fiber is what we're after. So really satisfy that. If you're satisfying that snack period with a quality source, then you're helping yourself out. If you're really hungry and you're reaching for a soul food like chocolate or biscuits, you're probably going to go down that binging route because your body's searching for that satisfaction of that hunger. Like it wants to be that hunger to be satisfied. It wants its energy levels to be satisfied. It's not going to find it in that soul food. So that's why if you top up with a soul food for enjoyment, it's why it tends to drop off because you're actually satisfying all that your body needs with the body food.
Interesting.
That makes sense.
That's perfect.
Okay.
That's makes a lot of sense. I think that's
it's what I put emphasis on. Just listen to your body. Just reconnect with your body because we've lost. I think a lot of us have lost, and I can speak from experience too. It's how I got to this. Well, I guess what I present as a dietitian too. Yeah. Because I've been through that journey. This is the diet culture. We're all just victims of it essentially and coming out of it.
That's true. Like victim of the diet culture because going back years and years ago, there was a whole point of carbs were bad and then fats were bad. And then like they kept chopping and changing. But now it's obviously there's more people kind of open up to where it's a balance of everything and how it kind of interplays with your life and what you like, what makes you feel good and about yourself and everything going forward as well.
Absolutely. It's I've seen it so many times with my clients when once they see the benefits of, including all the food groups that their body needs and having that positive relationship with food, it essentially, you can physically see it, just the weight lifts off their shoulders. And, I've had, which I really feel honored that they'd share it with me, but, people crying in my office about how much it's actually just changed their overall life purely just because they worked on their relationship with food. It's a really powerful feeling. And it just goes to show how much of an impact food really can have in all aspects of our life.
Yeah, right. That's so true. Before we finish off the podcast, last two questions.
Yes.
These are the ones I'm going to put you on the spot.
Oh, God.
All right?
Okay.
If you're going to have dinner with any 4 people,
oh, no.
you could choose, who would it be?
Anyone in the world, including celebrities? Everyone?
Yep. Anyone.
God, I hate these questions too.
Too bad.
I know I'm going to go home like, damn, I should have said that person. Number one, not to get all sappy, but I lost my dad almost 18 months ago, so I would love to have dinner with him again, just because he's probably the best person to talk to. Who else? I really can't.
I told you, I texted you, I said, be ready for anything.
Budget things, these sort of things. Sorry.
That's right.
I would love to just pick people's brains about. So if we think, I know, athletes like Michael Jordan.
Yep.
I think people from different areas. I would love to, I don't know, David Attenborough.
Yeah, right. That's a good one. Sir David Attenborough.
Yeah, sorry. But Oprah Winfrey, I think I would love to talk to people from all different areas of life, like the athletes, people who are activists in their areas, just because I think that you could just learn so much. And maybe the entertainment factor too. Yeah. And I feel like I would just be the average Joe, just like,
Do you consider Michael Jordan the ultimate epitome of athlete?
I mean, there are definitely many, many athletes out there that could be seen as, the GOAT in their area. But I think just struggles they go through, the fight they have to push through, just in all areas of their life, I think is something we can all definitely learn from.
Oprah Winfrey's been mentioned a couple of times on that question, and so is Michael Jordan, but David Attenborough, the first one. Yeah,
again, just I think from even just
his voice, he would sound good on a microphone.
He would be great. But just from an activist point of view too, to someone who's so passionate about what they believe in and their area, that want to make a positive change in the world, I think anyone like that, and that doesn't need to be someone that is that high profile, but I think anyone who have those aspirations are pretty incredible people to talk to.
Who want to change the world, and
whether it's the actual world or whether it's just a person's world. Taking it down into a community level, I think that is a pretty powerful thing. I mean, we all actually can do that.
Yeah.
Even if it's walking past someone now I'm taking it real corny. Walking past and just giving them a smile, because you have no idea what happens to someone on the outside world or what they might present to the world. But
that's a good point, because we're such emotional beings.
We really are, and I think I even noticed that, especially when we, through the whole COVID period, having to wear face masks. I was telling someone about this the other day, is, I was sitting with a client post-lockdown, I'm had to wear face masks. And I think I struggled a lot to build that rapport with a client when the face mask was on. And the week after I saw him, face mask off, it was completely different connection. Like as human beings, we really rely on that physical touch, that sight, we can actually see people's emotions, and all of that is a pretty powerful thing.
Connectedness, the community aspect is what humans are, really, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
The last one. If money wasn't an object and nothing was impossible, what would you do?
What would I do? Oh, jeez. Just the one thing? Like just
Anything. You could do
one
anything
thing?
you wanted.
Part of me kind of wanted to go, well, I've definitely take the charity route. For me, a big passion of mine is fundraising. So when I mentioned my father passed away, he passed away of motor neuron disease. So family is a big driver in raising money and awareness for the cure and support of people living with M&D. So I would definitely devote myself to that. It'd be great to not have to work and just work with that.
Yes.
Well, other part of me just loves to travel too. So I probably just travel the world, get as much experience, exposure to anything that I can.
That'd be hard now. You don't want to travel.
Look, if COVID wasn't a thing, that'd be great. But yeah.
I hope we can travel soon. It'd be nice to get away.
I definitely would, yeah.
Anyway, that question was brought to you by my number one podcast listener, my Uncle Frank. Thank you, Uncle Frank. Thank you, Liana, for joining me on the podcast. Do you want to say anything to finish the podcast off?
No, well, just thank you for having me on. It always blows my mind when people want to hear what I have to say. So thank you.
No, it was a pleasure to have you. And we can contact you at...
you can contact, through my socials, Liana Nici _ dietitian is my Instagram. Otherwise, you can also contact me through email, everything through there as well.
Beautiful. And I'll sure to put it all in the descriptions, in the notes, in this podcast. Always screw it up. Always screw that up. My brother always gives me a hard time about it. Can't you just say putting it in the show notes?
Is my Instagram.
No, I can't, Chris. I'm sorry.
Also contact there.
Thank you for everyone for listening. Beautiful. In the description.
Thank you so much.
In this podcast. Always screw it up. Always screw that up. My